Alright, so this is the last movie we'll need to talk about in regards to Blunt's very eventful 2012 year, which was this is actually the one in the middle. It was I think the 5 year engagement was in April, and then this came out in the summer, and then that following fall or towards the beginning of fall is when Looper came out. But despite the fact that the order is slightly out of whack, this is where we are. So, unlike Into the Woods and the 5 year engagement, this is one that I actually didn't have to give like a second chance per se, because I saw it when it came out in 2012 and ended up liking it quite a bit. And this is the kind of this is another one of those small indie movies, kind of in the same vein as, well, obviously it's Lynn Shelton, who we've talked about before with like Laggies and Touchy Feely and Hump Day, and this year she did Outside In, and it's one of those cases in the vein of like the Duplass brothers, for instance, or like the Joe Swanberg territory, where most of it is going to be kind of improv by the cast as it's like they're kind of sculpting it as it goes, as it's being made. And it's like having just talked about the 5 year engagement, it's like take a look at this Apatow, because this is the much better way to do improv rather than just saying different lines over and over again and just pretty much not editing them out. There's a good way to do that, and this is much more like that, where it definitely feels like it's the whole thing is being molded as it goes, which is the better way to go. But and of course, sort of at the center of this story is Mark Duplass's character, and if you've been watching anything that I do on here for the past 5.5 years, you will know that I am a huge fan of Mark Duplass, whether it be as an actor or a writer or a director. Jeff Who Lives at Home is like one of my favorite movies ever, and he really, I can only think of one miss. He wrote Black Rock, which was like basically his attempt to sort of do like a Deliverance sort of thing. That kind of ended up a piece of shit, but everything else he's done, I just gravitate to. And so, and of course, the cast list also being Blunt and Rosemary DeWitt. And the interesting thing about DeWitt was, number one, apparently she had to replace Rachel Weisz at the very last minute. Thank Christ. Because, once again, if you are familiar with these, you know how I feel about the charisma black hole that is Rachel Weisz. And also the fact that apparently not only was it super impressive that she was able to come in and do this at the very last minute, but it's my understanding that she wasn't as sort of experienced at the whole improv thing as the other two were, and the director, obviously. But everything sort of just fit together perfectly, and it's sort of, because this is one of those movies that's really important to have like a cast dynamic, and apparently it was just very natural very quickly, and you can tell. So as it starts off, you can tell that it might seem like slightly familiar territory, just kind of the content and the way it presents itself, like how there's something about indie movies, especially like this, that just really bask in like the awkwardness, how they sort of portray real life pretty much as is, but they especially go after the awkward shit. And go into that portrayal, and it's just immediately like in the first scene where Mike Birbiglia tells this heartwarming story about Mark Duplass's brother who has just died, who was the boyfriend of Iris, Blunt's character. And this is basically cut off by Duplass jumping in and telling this whole story regarding Revenge of the Nerds that basically ends with him saying, "My brother was a piece of shit, and you're all just ignoring that because he's dead." And in this particular moment, you're like, not only is this going to be one of those indie movies that basks in the awkwardness of it, but we're just going to dive balls first into it immediately and never return. Which is very exciting if it's going to be done right. Which, of course, this movie can do, especially when you look at the talent behind it. But when it comes to movies like this, also, there's going to be a certain balance between comedy and drama. And I had heard, I think, Duplass say once in an interview around the time it was out, where it was like, it really, obviously there is a balance between comedy and drama, but it's like, it really depends on the crowd you're watching it with in regards to what it's going to be more. So, like, if you were to see it with a crowd where, like, laughter is a bit contagious and people are a bit more open to reacting with people around them doing the same thing, it's probably going to come off a lot more like a comedy and have a lot more laughter in it. Whereas if you're just, like, watching it at home on TV or something, like, by yourself, it's a lot more likely to come off as a drama. Which is really interesting how it's sort of like it's sort of like a Rorschach test in regards to which genre it actually is, but I do think there is a perfect balance between both. Like, I've watched it by myself and in like a smaller house theater, and there is a difference, but I still find it just as funny alone. Uh, Particularly the way this, once again, it's most movies that are in this genre, but I mean this one in particular does it in a way that really stands out. Where you have, like, I talk about tackling the awkwardness, so you have stuff like how it like masters the art of the faux pas, more or less, where you sort of believe it. This kind of comes into DeWitt's performance also when they first meet, the two of them, and they've never met each other before, and they're at the dining room table, and they're basically just trying to get through small talk that's being egged on a little bit by alcohol. And things have loosened up maybe a bit too much, so when DeWitt just sort of mindlessly goes for the next piece of small talk, she says, do you have any siblings? And it's like, it's just that perfect moment, especially in her reaction to what she's just said, where she immediately catches herself. Where it's that just very relatable moment where you say something that you probably shouldn't have, and it's like really blatant, but like it just went right past your filter, and you can't take it back. Where it just completely portrays that stuff like as real as it possibly can, and that just immediately comes through, and you like feel the pain of DeWitt's character in this moment. Which, like I said, comes a lot through in her delivery also. And then, of course, this leads to the big turning point of the movie, this sex scene. And it's really... I mean, if you watch a lot of movies try and they fail, especially like big comedies, or big raunchy comedies or whatever, so judging by those, it's apparently really, really hard to make a sex scene funny. And the sex scene in this movie is fucking hilarious. Starting with this whole... the whole starting point is this little thing where Duplass has this thing that he's always wanted to do, where he takes his pants off and presents himself in this big way. And you can tell in this moment this is him conquering a dream. And DeWitt just has that perfect reaction of, alright, and they just let it go. they don't even have time for the awkwardness to set in for Duplass's reaction to this. It just goes right into the next thing. And it would do it a disservice to try to explain it play by play, but it is a very funny scene, but ultimately leads to the ultimate conflict in the movie, ironically enough. And then once Iris shows up, and then it becomes a three-person story, the conflicts have like only just started. So the thing here, one of the interesting things that stands out to me immediately is that before the whole potential pregnancy thing comes into it, and the fact that DeWitt's character might be a bit off to do some of the things that she does and make some of the decisions she makes, and just the fact that every character in this movie is sort of coming from a place that they know is a bit weird, given their relationship with the other people in the room. But one of the main conflicts is the fact that Blunt is secretly in love with Mark Duplass. And the thing that strikes me, even before the whole, oh, and her sister just slept with him and could potentially have his baby inside her or whatever, is like, it so kind of seems like this odd rarity to have the plot where it's the beautiful woman that's secretly in love with the dude instead of the other way around. And it's one of those things where it just seems like it'd be a normal plot, but it's like, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, it seems kind of interesting that they actually took that from the other direction, even though that's like just the tip of the iceberg of the conflict in this. So I liked how much that stood out, and then just how the rest of the movie is just them interacting, and it's like, with all the improv and the fact that they pretty much shaped the characters and the dialogue themselves as they went, it was really interesting to hear, like, them talk about it around the time it came out, and they were basically saying, like, like Blunt was saying, that when she started forming this character, she basically looked back on herself like 8 years prior and basically was her old self here. And the fact that people had watched it and basically said that they saw the people like as themselves, which seems like a really bizarre thing, because it's always that thing where I've always kind of had that wonder where it's like when you watch pretty much anything, no matter how outlandish the movie, it's like if an actor sees another actor that they really know personally in another movie, how much do they see that person? And it's like the whole idea of this movie is that the people who know these actors watch this and just see them on the screen, and that's like it's such an interesting thing that I kind of wish we saw a little more of, because a lot of these indie movies sort of try that, but they, at least lately, it seems like they almost get there, or they get there at least a little bit, but never quite as effectively as this, which I really love. And then, of course, once that's established, we just get the scenes where it's just them, just sort of interacting. These standalone scenes of just them being the characters, like when they eat the pancakes, for instance. But the thing about that is this is the part where a lot of people who like more plot-driven things than character-driven things might consider this one of those nothing happens movies. But the interesting thing here is that there is something constantly happening now, even if it's just them sitting around eating pancakes and being normal, because the conflict has already been laid down. And it's what the conflict is, that's always going to be there underlying everything that happens from now on. So, like, even if, Blunt and Duplass are just acting normal, we still know that he just slept with her sister and she's secretly in love with him. And the same thing with the two of them, and any combination of these three, with the two of them together, this underlying thing is always here forever now. And that's always going to add a little something extra to the scene, even if they're not outright addressing it, or the scene's not particularly going in a direction, because, I mean, it does have a problem a little bit, I think, where it's, like, it's sort of like they're playing up a bit of unnecessary suspense, where Mark Duplass's character gets really, like, paranoid after a while, and, like, almost every move that Iris makes has him panicking, like she's gonna find out, or like she knows. And I totally get why that would be in there, and it's to show, like, that's gotta be exactly what his character's feeling, but I feel like that there had to have been a more internalized way to do that, where it seems like every other cut to him is, like, this so not subtle reaction of panic that sooner or later you would think Iris would notice and wonder what that means, but, I do feel like they could have toned that down a little bit, but it's almost like the movie wants you to think she's always seconds from finding out, when the movie's at a good enough pace that it never quite feels like that. You kind of get a sense of it's going to reveal it when it's going to reveal it, and it's not going to be like some more cliche way of doing it. So in a way, it's like the movie almost, it should have just been itself and trusted itself to be exactly that, without trying to sort of, like I said, add unnecessary suspense to it. But that's just few and far between. And then, of course, it gets, as it goes on, it further becomes a conflict that these characters, not only is it just sort of weird, the different feelings they have towards the different people here, but the fact that it's really nice that the characters are fully aware of that. Where, like, it's weird that she's in love with the brother of the dude she was with that is dead now. And it's weird that not only did he sleep with a lesbian, but it's the sister of his best friend, and it's just everything that somebody feels in this movie is off, and they know it in a weird way. Hence the title that sort of stands out in an interesting way that you kind of have to watch to fully understand. But and then, yeah, eventually, since this whole segment is about praising Blonde, there's plenty of reason to do that here, especially in this last third or so, where she just takes an emotional beating more and more in every scene, and it is terribly painful to watch because you feel so bad for her. And she's just got, like, just for the entire last half hour, she's just got to put on those sad eyes. It's like those, those eyes that look like they can just, when she's just sort of look by herself and just looking and just sort of taking it all in, it's like her eyes can see the other side of the world. And then it gets to those scenes when it's like when he confesses his love to her and he says that he's leaving, and she's just breaking down, and it's like her reaction to this when he says he's leaving just like completely rips your heart in half. Like I said, to the point that it's almost hard to watch, but all the characters are just getting emotionally torn apart at this point for sure. Like I said, all the feelings are out there on the table, and so it's just, even though it seems like things are so like fucked beyond belief, it's like that we actually are able to reach a happy conclusion is like, I mean, usually happy endings would feel maybe a bit forced, especially with this much conflict, but it's like, when the happy ending gets here, you care so much about all three of them, it's like such a relief that it's all going to work out, and it's all going to be fine. I mean, we do end on the ending that we do, the very last shot, where once again, it's like, it just adds that little extra note of, like it wanted to add just a bit more to the proceedings when it really didn't necessarily have to, but it is a nice sort of fuck you ending, the way that all three of them have like a different reaction that could mean, like, Blunt's reaction says one thing, Duplass's reaction says another, DeWitt's like neutral, and it's, but yeah, I do kind of like it anyway. So, yeah, and amidst all this, it's like this movie that just sort of stealthily, like, really grabs a hold of you to where, like, you don't even realize how much you've invested in the characters until you reach the end, and you just sort of feel it. And it's like, in the way it moves, it's like, this movie is 90 minutes, it feels like 20. It's just goes, like I said, it just really takes a hold of you long before you've even realized it. And yeah, and I would say, as far as Shelton's filmography goes, like Hump Day and Touchy Feely, Outside In, Laggies, all of which are varying degrees of good. I think this is far and away her best so far. So of what I think those ones I listed might be the only ones I've seen. I might have missed one or two, but so yes, and this is basically the movie that gets me excited for. I did like Laggies a lot too, but like, this is the movie that makes me like, has forever made me excited when I hear Lynn Shelton's name and I see that she's going to be doing something else. Even if the last one may have been like underwhelming or whatever, still you just get a sense that there's going to be something else great from her, if not multiple things over time. So yeah, and obviously just all the things going on here mesh together, particularly the cast with her as well. So yeah, so that's going to be what this is. I think the next one is going to be, oh god, once again, I can't remember. I'm going to have to look it up again. It might be Salmon Fishing in the Yemen, I think. We'll say that, and then we'll see what happens. So, so until that, that's it.